Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on optimizing your fundraising strategy, how to choose your best fundraising strategy and say no to the rest. My name is Leah, and I'm the Head of Product Marketing here at CharityEngine. Today, we're excited to welcome Leah Goss, a proven leader in the nonprofit development space. Over the course of her career, Leah has raised more than $50 million and led transformational fundraising efforts for a wide range of nonprofit organizations. Leah currently serves as a consultant and a fundraising coach with Seed Fundraisers, where she partners with nonprofits to build sustainable, high-performing fundraising programs. Now, if you haven't or heard of Seed Fundraisers, if you're not familiar with them, I highly recommend checking them out. It's a wonderful consultancy that provides very targeted support. They do staff augmentation through fractional director of development roles. So if that's something of interest, I highly recommend them. They've been, I've been hearing wonderful things about Seed Fundraisers for a good while now. Quick housekeeping item, a few notes regarding today's webinar. This session is being recorded, so you will receive a recording right after today's call. We're also going to be monitoring the chat, so if you have questions throughout this webinar, please feel free to pop them into our chat on the bottom right. And before I pass it over to Leah, I'd just like to take a moment to briefly introduce CharityEngine. If you're not familiar with us, we are sponsoring today's webinar. I'm going to share a slide here. CharityEngine is a unified fundraising platform in CRM. You can see what we call our CharityEngine wheel on the left-hand side. All of these modules are native to our system, so everything you need as a fundraiser to fundraise effectively is available in our platform. And the best part is that these tools are native, so your data lives in one place. What that means for you is that you have a complete donor view of all your donor interactions. It's easier for your team because they're going to one system as opposed to multiple ones. Because all the data lives in one place, it's much easier to generate your reports. Decisions are made by reliable, real-time data, and ultimately it's a confidence and peace of mind that you have everything in one place. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Leah. Leah, welcome. Over to you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. And I hope I'm just going to back this slide up because I don't know if any of you identify with this image. Personally, I've been in fundraising for 30 years, both as a full-time director of nonprofits and college foundations, as well as working off and on in consultancy. And so now that's really my focus right now. And I want this to be kind of a heart-to-heart between me and you, because as fundraisers, we know the challenges that we face. We know how hard this work is, and we know how important it is that we raise money to fulfill our missions. And so my experience has been over the years, there's no strategy I haven't done. And I've had great success with some, okay success with others, and not very much success with others as well. And what attracted me to partner with Seed at this stage in my career is that I really loved how well they've captured and structured fundraising strategies to help us determine what the best strategy is. And rather than going for a quick fix or trying to do everything and being battered, I kind of think of it as a ship on the sea, and the wind is coming every which way because everybody's telling us, well, you know, you should have an event. That would be great. Or go after grants. Everyone can experience folks telling them what the best strategy is and that's what you ought to focus on. Meantime, you're trying to run your organization, I suspect, as well as raise the money. And that's always the challenge. smaller organizations typically don't have identified gift officers, maybe not even someone who runs the event for them, if they're going to have an event. So what we try to do at Seed is help you identify the best strategy for you and then teach you how to scale it. And that's the other piece that really has impressed me with Seed, is that they've really figured out what that looks like, what full optimization looks like. So that's what I hope to introduce you to today. And we have a lot of material to get through, but I want to start by talking about the foundational principles of fundraising, because here are some things that are going to matter no matter what strategy you have. And I find as I work with clients that these are areas that we kind of start with, and these all apply no matter what strategy you're doing. So I want to touch on those so that as I go through then the different strategies in a little bit here, you'll understand what's meant by those particular items. So the first thing that I want to say is what I always do when I do a seminar is, as a fundraiser, we need a certain mindset. And it's really important, for example, that we have passion for our mission. I suspect most of you do, or you wouldn't be there. But you need to be aware and understand the importance of the fact that passion is contagious. I've sat on an airplane before next to people who ask me what I do, and I just sort of passionately go into whatever the cause is that I've been involved in at that particular time. And by the end of the conversation, sometimes those folks are ready to say, hey, that really sounds cool. I love that. How can I get involved? Or good luck to you. So passion really matters in fundraising. The second thing is that you really need to know how to tell your story. And by that, the story of the organization and the impact. Storytelling is really, really vital, no matter what strategy you have. It exhibits itself differently depending on the strategy, but being able to tell your story of your cause and your impact is really vital. The next item, I think, is the hardest one for fundraisers, which is that we need to live in abundance. It's very tempting to feel like we're in competition with other nonprofits all the time, and that money they get is money we don't get, and that there's not enough out there to go around. I challenge you to embrace the reality that we live in abundance. There is plenty of money out there for every good cause. So if our cause doesn't have it, it could be because we haven't told our story enough ways to enough people to excite them and convert them to being supporters of our organization. So don't be tempted to feel like there's not enough money, because there is. And the numbers, when you look at Giving USA, over 500 million donated to nonprofit causes last year. There's plenty out there. And then finally, this one is also really important. Most wealth is hidden. We can be tempted to go after maybe the big foundations we've heard of to get funding, or the richest people we've ever heard of, to see if we can get them to give us money. The truth is that your cause is going to be sustained primarily by people whose wealth is not apparent, not by the house they live in or how prominent necessarily they are in the community. And there's plenty of stories I could tell you that would prove that. But I think that these are important mindsets to have as we go into this work. The next thing, and I don't have time obviously to go into all the detail here, but every time I take a new role, the first thing I look at in that organization is how strong is our communication plan. And I usually find that that they're very weak, that they're not comprehensive, that they're not consistent. And so I really challenge you that that's the first thing you could do as you're thinking about how to reach more folks and gain more support, is how well and how strong are you communicating? And it starts with being able to identify all the different audiences that you have. You don't just have one monolith of an audience. You have a lot of audiences. Your donors are your audience. Donor prospects are your audience. Corporations, civic and governmental leaders are potentially your audience, as well as those you want to serve. So spend some time identifying each of those audiences and what it is that they need to hear from you. Then make sure you've identified all the ways you're going to communicate that. That's the how. And then establish a frequency. How often are they going to hear from you? And then finally, what's the call to action? That's really, really important, is that call to action for each of these audiences. So again, this is foundational and something that I always have looked at in a new role that I've taken, and that I coach the clients that I work with around this. The next thing that we spend a lot of time, I've spent a lot of time on with my clients, is clear messaging. I find that many nonprofits have not developed a case for support. And if you haven't, that's something to work on. There's lots of information out there in terms of what needs to go into that. But basically, I boil it down to, are you clear about the problem your organization was built to address? And are you clear about what your intervention is, your disruption of the status quo? What is it that you're doing that is going to address this problem? And in terms of the validated framework you see there on the slide, do you have evidence that what you're doing actually works? And what about your vision? Your vision statement, your impact statement? Do you have a strong impact statement, which means, do you have a description of what it looks like if you knock it out of the park within your organization's lifetime? Having a strong impact statement is something that inspires people and makes them want to support what you do. So we encourage that. From that vision statement, you want some missional goals. So missional goals are the bite-sized pieces you're taking out of that big vision that describes the impact you're going to make over the next perhaps 3 to 5 years. And these lead to revenue goals. So if you can articulate that well so that people understand that you know exactly where you're going, you know exactly what you need to do to get the impact that you're trying to get, and this is what it's going to cost. And then those become those fundable things that you can ask folks to support. And the final thing I'll say about this glossary here of messaging is it's important to distinguish between output and outcome. So output means you're quantifying the work that you're doing. So just grabbing something out of the air, you're quantifying that you fed 1,000 homeless people last month. That's quantity. What's the quality of your program results? What change has occurred because you were able to do that? So this becomes super important with grants, but it's really important with all funders as well. So be able to distinguish between output and outcome. And I want to share with you that this slide right here, this information, this material is one of the hardest things that I find nonprofits have to do, because they haven't really been able to articulate all of this clearly and very well. So I really encourage you to spend some time here as you think about strengthening your fundraising. And then finally, there's essential infrastructure that you have to have no matter what strategy you're using. So you need some kind of program management tools or approaches that give you those insights on your impact. Again, it's about outcomes, not just output. You also need a very good website that's optimized for conversion, meaning when people find you and land on your website, Does it immediately engage them, take them on a bit of a journey about who you are and what you do and the impact you're having, and lead them directly and quickly to being able to make a gift? And is it easy to make a gift on your website? Make sure it's not cluttered up with lots of decisions that somebody has to make about where they want their money to go. Make it easy for them, and obviously optimized both for computers as well as phones. And then the last thing that's really essential is you need a strong CRM that will do the following things, that will give you intuitive and robust reporting features, so you can pull the data out of your database of what you need about who supports you, who they are, how much they give, what they might be interested in. And that's essential. You need a CRM that really empowers stewardship. The programs today are so different from when I first started out, honestly, 30 years ago. And the ability to automate the donor journey and communicate effectively and efficiently is really, really powerful these days. The other part about that is being able to segment your donor database. We go into a lot of detail with our clients around how they can segment their donor base in order to target messaging specifically to those folks, whether it's through email or even a mailing. And then finally, I think the most powerful thing that I love is the ability of CRMs to create dashboards for you that help you to power the donor journey. So whatever strategy you're doing, you know, when you log into your CRM, do you have a dashboard that tells you how you're doing and reminds you what your priorities are overall, as well as even for that day? And finally, what I'll say is I am CRM agnostic, which means I don't promote any particular CRM. I think that each organization has to find the CRM that fits them the best, both financially, what they can afford, as well as the capabilities that it has. So I just wanted to mention that. And then finally, here's a big one. If it's not recorded in your CRM, it never happened. This is one of the big, I hate to use the word failures, but things that we struggle to do because we have so much to do, is we have conversations with people and we might take notes on a tablet in front of us, but that information never gets into the CRM. Your CRM needs to become way more than just a file drawer of names and gift records. It needs to include everything that you know about that donor, so that if you have someone helping you or someone comes along behind you, they can quickly understand the history your organization has with that donor and what's important to know about them. And when was the last time someone reached out to them? All of that needs to be there. Otherwise, we can be stepping over ourselves and embarrassing ourselves because we might reach out to someone who either they haven't heard from us in 3 years, or they just heard from someone else in the organization last week. So really treat your CRM as a vital, vital resource. All right, now I'm going to jump into what the 5 strategies of fundraising are. Now, I'm not going to say there maybe aren't other strategies out there, but these are the ones Seed has identified as the primary. And we're going to start on the upper left with annual giving. And these are the definitions of these strategies as per Seed, the way Seed talks about it. And I want you to think of annual giving as recurring giving, because the term annual giving suggests to me that we're just trying to get people to give once a year, and that's not the case. We are talking about getting people to give on a recurring basis. If you've heard and seen some of the books that are out there lately about subscription fundraising, that's a bit of a craze or new thing right now, supposedly. All this really is recurring giving. And the way we activate recurring giving is through compelling content. And I'm going to take each of these strategies and tell you what it kind of looks like to optimize them, and how you can know whether or not this is a good strategy for you. So think about compelling content for annual or recurring giving. Events, we describe those as we're activating generosity through curated experiences. So you think about whether it's a gala or some other kind of event, you're bringing people together and you're going to curate that event in such a way that they walk away going, wow, that was amazing. And they feel inspired to want to give. Those are the kind of events you want to strive for. The next one is major gifts down here on the lower left. This one is about activating generosity through personal relationships. And what I'll say about that is that I think that we do that all the time, right? Because we're interacting with people all the time. So we should always be building those relationships with our donors. However, to make major gifts a primary strategy, that means certain things for how you go about your work on a daily and weekly basis. And we'll talk about that. Then on the right, lower, corporate sponsorships. This one is about activating corporate responsibility through meaningful value propositions. So I'll distinguish between corporate sponsorships as a major strategy as opposed to getting sponsors for your events. Those aren't necessarily quite the same thing, although they could be. So, and then finally, we'll talk about grant writing and how we're activating institutional generosity through very structured processes and technical writing. So those are the 5 strategies we're going to look at today. The next thing I'm going to show you here is, okay, well, what does it mean? If you're saying I need to pick one or 2 at the most, what does it mean to fully optimize? The first thing it means is, think of the 90-10 rule. What this means is you're going to spend 90% of your time on your chosen strategy and only 10% in what we call opportunistic time. Like somebody comes to you with a great idea, they want to do it. And so, you go along with that and you do it, whether it's a private event or some other kind of a small activity or project. But don't let opportunities distract you from where you need to be spending 90% of your time. Because if you do, you won't fully optimize the strategy. And that's where the scale comes from. That's how we scale. So you need to dedicate yourself to that. And that can be hard because we have board members who read a book and say, hey, this is what we need to do. Or somebody calls you on the phone and says, hey, we have this great fundraising activity that you can do, and you can raise all this money if you do this and partner with us, and we'll help you do it. And I've seen this happen where sometimes in the end, the organization gravitated to that because they didn't have an overall strategy, and it ended up costing them more than they were able to raise. So you really need to commit yourself to that. And then don't add anything until you have fully optimized the 1 or maybe 2 strategies that you're really trying to scale. As you scale, of course, you have ideally more revenue, and then you can expand your team and other things and other strategies can become more possible to you. Here are the ways that we want to judge a strategy to help us determine if it's a good one or not for our organization. The first one is it sustainable? Will this strategy give us long-term and reliable income, as well as lasting relationships with donors? rather than just a short-term, quick fix, flash in a pan fundraiser. You want to be looking for its potential for sustainability for your organization. The second thing you want to look at is what's the return on investment. What this means is how much money are you going to be able to raise based on how much you have to spend. A good cost per dollar raised goal to shoot for is 25 to 35 cents on a strategy. But keep in mind, and we'll talk about this more, typically you're not going to start out that way with a new strategy. You're going to have to build. And so that's why we talk about the return horizon. When can you expect to see a return on this strategy if you put it into place? Does it have long-term viability for you? And depending on where you are with your organization and its needs, you might need something that has a quicker return horizon. And you'll see in a minute that some of these strategies have a longer return horizon. So that's another way to judge it. Scalability is another important one. Does this have the ability to expand its reach and efficiency as it grows, ensuring long-term success? Again, we don't want flash in the pan activities. We want something we can start to build and keep scaling. And then finally, we want to look at how much infrastructure is required. We all know that generally speaking, smaller nonprofits are understaffed and overworked and struggle to have the resources they need to invest in fundraising. And so what resources does your organization have, and what is your capacity to take on these different strategies? So now what I'm going to show you is a rating chart, and I've simplified this from the seed model, which is way more detailed with lots of dots. And so I've just gone with colors. And when you see the red on here, I want you to think in terms of, that's, it's not a stop sign, but it's a watch out sign, because the downside can be significant on it. Where you see green, I want you to think, okay, that's a go, meaning that's doable. You know, this we could do, or this would give us what we're looking for without tremendous effort or cost. And then all the yellow, see that is, you know, it's okay. It's going to be good enough, or it's going to be decent, and it has the possibility of working. And I'm going to go through each of these really quickly, and then we're going to get into each strategy in a little more detail. So let's talk about major gifts for a minute. You can see here that we have a big red block under sustainability. The reason for that is that because it's so relationship based, if you have turnover in your organization, if you get a new executive director or a new gift officer or whatever, then those relationships kind of have to be rebuilt and re-strengthened. So it ranks low on sustainability for that reason. But return on investment is really high, meaning that you can expect a big return for the least amount of money spent, because again, it's very relational. The return horizon is good, and scalability is good. And what's especially good is you can get by with the least amount of infrastructure. So this is often a strategy that smaller nonprofits will gravitate to, but there's other things to consider before you settle on that, and we'll talk about those. Let's look at events. Events have a lot of sustainability, meaning that once you get a signature event established and you're growing it every year, it can become a very sustainable source of revenue. I worked for a college once where I inherited an annual gala that they'd been doing for like 20 years. And they were raising $500,000 to $700,000 at most at that gala. And when I came into that organization, it was a college, and I told the staff and I told the board, we really should be doing $1 million at this gala for a variety of reasons. And so I challenged them, and then we put into effect strategies to build that event. And we indeed did do that. We doubled it to 1.1 million in 1 year. And that obviously was primary revenue for us, a lot of revenue for us. The return on investment. So this one, events are expensive, but as you grow them, you're able to scale them, and you can get your investment costs for those down to a reasonable amount. And we'll talk about that too. Return horizon's pretty good. You could look at a couple of years, maybe, of scaling an event up to where it really is significant. And again, it's very scalable. But as you know, infrastructure, you need a strong team. You got to have staff and volunteers and processes and systems to help you manage a significant event. So that's why that's a red color there. Grants kind of across the board are good in terms of, I would say, good to average sustainability, ROI, return horizon, scalable, and infrastructure. But we'll talk more about some of the unique challenges of grants here in a minute. Recurring gifts, it gets a nice big green block because this one's very sustainable. If you can get people to commit to regular giving, whether it's monthly or quarterly or even annual gifts that are significant, and then you maintain those relationships, it's a very sustainable strategy. The return on investment and the return horizon are okay, they're good. This is also very scalable, meaning that you can really build on this and really grow it. But the red block is because it takes a lot of infrastructure, a lot of communication, and you'll see what that looks like here in a minute. And then finally, corporate giving. This can be very sustainable for sure, because once you can get established with hopefully a big corporation or a good, strong local business that really loves what you do, they often will continue to support you. And so the return on investment for that is pretty good. The return horizon and scalability also gets good marks in terms of that. And the infrastructure isn't quite as heavy. So that is a quick overview of how we rate the strategies. So now I'm going to jump into them, and keeping an eye on my clock here because I want to have time for questions at the end. You want to consider major gifts as a primary strategy if you have evidence of donors with capacity and propensity to give. In other words, rich people, or people who know rich people. Now, remember what I said, most wealth is hidden, so don't get too hung up on that. But you want to have a reason to believe that there are potential donors out there that have capacity to give and would want to give to your cause. The other thing you really need are able and willing connectors. Board members should be great resources for that. And it's something to think about when you're recruiting board members is, what are their connections? What are their networks? Are they networked strongly in the community or in this particular mission sphere that would help give you introductions? You want to have inspiring program goals that you can really impact people when you're talking with them one-on-one. Again, think of this as very much one-to-one, and you want clear evidence of your impact. The average ROI, return on investment, for major gifts is 6 to 12 months. That's the shortest of all the strategies, and that's because it's very personal, very one-on-one. But what's it going to take? Well, I've tried to highlight in all of these strategies how a CRM can help you with each of these strategies. And what helps most with a CRM with major gifts is some kind of a moves management system or donor journey tracking and dashboards. Because, you know, when I started out, I relied on a legal pad on my desk and I'd make lists of people that I needed to call. Well, we need way more than that. If we're going to fully optimize, we really have to identify and have a plan for how we're going to approach every major gift prospect. And we need to, every week, we should have actions that move us forward in that relationship. So that's really vital and important to look for in your CRM. The second thing I will say that's the hardest, if you're running a nonprofit as well as being responsible for raising the money, is carving out consistent time to dedicate to it. You really need to put at least one full day a week. I used to break it up to a half a day, 2 to 3 days a week. And even that was hard in a lot of my roles where I was solo and didn't have much administrative support. But it's really important to know that you can't raise money if you're sitting behind your desk. You have to be out there meeting with people, talking with people, getting to know them, getting to know what they care about, and sharing the impact of your organization. And once I was really able to discipline myself to do that, I found that there was not a single visit I ever made that was a waste of time. I often walked away with new commitments to give from those visits, or a new commitment came soon afterwards. So you have to be out the door meeting with people. And as you can imagine, it takes time to figure out, okay, who are those people I need to meet with? And then you got to set something up. So you don't just come into the office and decide, well, I'm going to go call on so-and-so. So there's a lot of planning involved in that and identification as to who your top prospects are. The other thing you really need is excellent collateral. You really need very professional, nicely laid out materials to share as leave behinds with folks that you're meeting with like this. It really helps. And then prospect research is really important. In one of my jobs that I had with a college, I had someone whose entire role was dedicated to prospect research. And she spent her time digging into our donor database, which was vast, and finding people with capacity, doing wealth research on them, and then coming to me and saying, this is somebody you need to meet. So if you can get help on that, that's really great. At the very least, be looking at who's sponsoring all the fundraisers in your city or your town and identifying those as potential prospects that you want to at least inquire with. So that's major gifts. Let's go to events. Consider an event if your mission lends itself well to storytelling in a specific time and place, meaning you're going to gather folks together and you are going to deliver a story. Like I said earlier, people walk away going, wow, it's memorable. They don't forget about it. You also need to have enough outreach that you can get people in the room. You can get them there so that you can continually to grow attendance at this event. That's very important. And then the life stage of your organization needs to match the time you need to scale, because the first time you do it, you are going to probably spend more money than you make. That's okay, as long as your plan is to scale. And to fully scale events, you're probably looking at an ROI of at least 3 years, maybe longer. But if you focus on that as a strategy and it's a good fit, you will get there. What you need to scale events, you need strong gift acknowledgement and receipting processes that really help propel the donor journey. We'll talk about that a little more in a different strategy. You need a robust communication and marketing plan. You have to get the word out widely, broadly about the event and make it very accessible to people to be able to sign up and come. And then you need a strong planning and logistics team. You shouldn't be trying to do this all by yourself. Volunteers are fine if they're reliable and talented and they understand what needs to be done. But hopefully you have staff as well, because events are very, very time and work intensive. So let's look at grants. Grants, what's important about grants is that you have a very strong logic model that's supported by clear program design. Now, this is an area that we do focus in on with clients, and it's important to be able to prove from external information that what you're doing actually works. When you're going after grants, that's what funders are really looking for. They're not just looking for a good emotional story. They're looking for validated change and proof that the approach you're taking actually works to achieve the transformation you're looking for. And the other thing you need for grants is you need a cause or a mission that has broad appeal to a lot of funders. For example, things like basic needs, workforce development, education, mental health, youth programs, those kind of all fall into broad spaces where there are plenty of grantors that are looking to fund those things. What would be more narrow and harder, because the audience would be smaller, and that doesn't mean you can't do it, but it's going to be a smaller audience, and it might not lend itself that way to grants unless you find grantors that are very specifically in your space. So for instance, religion. I spent a year working with a Christian school, and they found that just going after grants, unless they were very narrowly tailored to specific funders that had that same faith commitment, just wasn't going to fly. So they had a more narrow mission that was not going to have general appeal. So it could be a very narrow geographic appeal. That's harder to get grants from, at least big ones from maybe outside your area. Maybe smaller ones within your area would take that on. And if they're related to hobbies or special interest things, again, think about a narrowing audience for the thing you're doing. And again, it doesn't mean you can't raise that money, but you've got to have strategies to find the people or the grantors that care about those things. You also really need to know how to write a grant. And we talk about having a grant language source book. There is kind of a science to writing grants. There's language you want to use. There's approaches that you want to take with a funder. And you also, though, need to be able to have a compelling narrative that combines with your data to prove impact. So that's the short overview of grants. Now we're going to look at recurring gifts or annual gifts. This, I want you to think in terms of the nonprofits that are ubiquitous. Locally, frankly, I think about my local rescue mission. We're on their mailing list, and they know that when they send us a mailing, we're gonna respond and give them a gift. They have a whole department dedicated to that kind of communication. You have to make a big investment in direct response science and in the tools and systems and staff that are needed to sustain that. I know the person that runs the development department at our Denver rescue mission, and he's recently transitioned out of managing that department to now going to major gifts. So that's an example of a nonprofit that optimized a strategy that's worked well for them, and now they're growing and they're adding to it by making him a major gift officer. Major gift officers, generally speaking, they're being given a portfolio of about 100 names or contexts, and that's all they do is work that portfolio. It's really kind of a sales approach, honestly. It's what salespeople do. And so that's how major gifts really produces results. And you do need to be able to tell compelling stories through words and imagery. So we say that the return on investment for recurring gifts is about 2 to 3 years, because it's going to take time to build your mailing list. You need a willingness to test and to learn from what it is you're doing, because some things are going to work and some things aren't going to work very well. And you need to be able to constantly analyze and report on performance. The other thing that's really important with your CRM is the ability to segment and customize and automate strategic donor communications. This is something very powerful that good CRMs can do, and it saves you a great deal of time, so that it's not suddenly Friday morning and it's time to do the weekly email to a certain group of supporters or whatever your communication plan is calling for. You already have this planned, figured out, and in many cases already written and just ready to hit the button and out it goes. So that's the magic of recurring gifts. Corporate sponsors, so this is a little bit different, not completely, but a little different than just getting somebody to sponsor an event that you're doing. Because think about the breast cancer awareness organizations and the pink ribbon. Delta gave them $1 million to put their pink ribbon on the tail of their airplanes. What you want to have, if you're really going to maximize and optimize corporate sponsorships, is a program or a mission that has 2 factors: an ever-expanding public outreach and awareness, and the potential for mass volunteerism. And when I say that, even in a small town where you're looking for maybe a bank to sponsor you, or a plant of some kind, often what companies like that are looking for is, how can we get our employees involved? And if you have a cause that has a lot of confidentiality around it and not easy ways for people to volunteer, then those wouldn't be the strongest factors to cause you to consider that. The other thing you really need are sponsorable assets that will support the mission and provide great marketing ROI for the company that's going to sponsor you. Automatically, of course, working in college settings, I think about naming programs, naming buildings, naming rooms, all of the things that are available. And you can be creative. You don't have to be at college to have those things. And corporate sponsorships can have a pretty quick return on investment, and they can grow. But as we said before, when we looked at the rating table, we put that in the red as being of concern, because corporations, generally speaking, don't always fund things forever. And new management comes in, just like it does to grantor organizations, and they get a different direction they want to take. So be aware of that. Once you get it, it doesn't mean you'll always have it. And so it's really important to maintain it. And so you do need a strong CRM to manage a sponsorship portfolio. You need to have well-designed packages and the ability to fulfill the benefits and manage the volunteers. So those are the 5 strategies. How to choose your best strategy? Well, I hope that that you've gotten the idea that you're looking for a good fit for your organization. What strategy fits your mission, your program, your outcomes, and honestly, your community. How big is your community or small is your community? I worked with a community foundation last summer that the population is scarce, is southeast Colorado, and there's hardly anybody there. So how do they tell their story and inspire the people who are there that include a number of people with a lot of wealth? How do we engage them? So it needs to fit your organization. It needs to fit the human resources you have. Don't take on something that's going to take a whole lot of people if you don't have a whole lot of people, or really great willing volunteers. And there are some organizations that have those. You're also going to need technical capacity. And it's one of the things I focus on with every new client. Typically, they have a CRM that just isn't adequate for what it is they want to do. And so you either have to work within its restraints and find workarounds, or you need to invest. It needs to fit your organization's life stage. You need a willingness to risk and invest, or it might be better to say an ability to risk and invest. And then, does this fit our short-term and long-term financial needs? So those are the factors to look at. And finally, I want to close with, remember the 4 B's. Be willing to learn. To absolutely optimize any of these strategies means you really have to learn way more about it than you do right now. Be committed to the 90-10 rule. Be willing to invest, and beware of ratios. I'm working with an organization right now, and it's about 3 years old, going into its 4th year, and they've kept their ratios, or their efficiency ratios, very low. But now they've added some part-time staff to help support their executive director. So now their ratio is going down, and the board is panicking, like, oh my gosh, we were like at 73%, and now we're down to 55. This is terrible. Actually, no, it's okay to invest and have a period of time where you're scaling. That is okay. And don't let that prevent you from making an investment. All right, I'm going to stop there because I want time for questions and interaction. So
fair enough. We did get a couple of questions, and thank you so much, Leah. A lot of good content here. I'm going to share some of the questions and we can engage in the discussion, but I did want to just highlight one quick gift for our audience today before we dive into a question. So Leah has shared several fundraising strategies that nonprofits can use to fundraise more effectively, service their mission, and so on. And as she pointed out, technology is part of that. Technology plays a big role. And to quote what you had said earlier, Leah, it's, if it's not in your CRM, it never happened, right? So with that in mind, we're offering what we're calling a revenue reality check. It's a 15-minute personalized diagnostic of your fundraising and donor experience. So essentially, it's our team looking at your tech stack, your monthly giving program, if you have one, your overall donor experience. And afterward, what you're essentially going to get is a 2-page summary outlining where we see opportunities to strengthen your fundraising approach. I just want to be clear, this isn't a sales call in disguise. Our goal here is really just to build meaningful connections with the nonprofit community. And we also are tight on our resources. So we're just setting aside 8 slots. So for anybody who's interested in this, please feel free to use this QR code and book your spot. You do not need to be evaluating CRMs or looking to purchase anything. This is simply an opportunity to get an outside perspective on your fundraising strategy. All right, with that out of the way, Leah, I'm going to ask you a question. This one came in. Oh, by the way, we had a couple of folks asking for the recording. I just want to reassure everybody, you will get the recording after this session. You will get it in your email. It's going to be probably within an hour or so. We have a question. How do you effectively push back on the board that wants to do a bit of everything as opposed to focusing on 1 or 2 strategies? I think this goes back to what you were saying earlier. Sometimes you do have a board who has an idea here and an idea there, and they kind of want to just do a little bit of everything. Meanwhile, you as a development director have finite resources. How do you approach that situation?
That is a great question, and it's one of the hardest things, I believe. This client that I just mentioned that their board is concerned about ratios, even though they were willing to make the investment. What she has done, the director has done is, and here's what I would recommend. I think it's a combination of educating your board and having some courage. I use the word courage because throughout my career, I've had moments where I've said, hey, look, if we do this, these are the outcomes that I believe will happen. Do you believe it enough to advocate for it? Do you have enough information that you can answer the questions that they have? Do you have a plan that assures them that, yes, this will work if we can set the resources aside and really optimize? So I would encourage you to do the research on it, evaluate this information, do more research yourself, figure out what you think fits you best, and then absolutely, you got to educate your board, you got to advocate for it, and you're going to have some courage, because sometimes you get a lot of pushback, but you need a board that supports the best strategy and being a part of that. So that's my best answer to that. It's hard. It can be hard.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think we all find ourselves in similar situations, no matter what we're doing at our job. There's always no shortage of ideas, but there's generally shortage of resources to execute on those ideas. So being able to push back and advocate for, where to put your energy into, I think is really important.
Yep.
We did get another question. This one is about ROI. So the question is, when organizations evaluate ROI across strategies like events, grants, and major gifts, which is what you talked about, what metrics do you recommend they track to make sure they're comparing them fairly?
So you're talking about the rating agencies and how they look at them, or just in general?
I think this this attendee is thinking about when they're you had a very nice a metric where you were looking at how to evaluate which strategy you should focus on, but I think they're trying to go a little deeper as far as looking at, should they be also looking at certain metrics when they're evaluating which strategy to pursue?
Yes. So I tried to give you a little bit of a taste of that as I went through. That certain missions, certain organizations lend themselves better to one strategy versus another. So for instance, for grants, if you have a really strong logic model and great evidence about the efficacy of what you're doing and its likelihood that it is working, evidence that it is working, that makes grants, combined with, is your cause big enough to appeal to a broad audience? So one of the metrics you'd want to look at is, what is the strength of our program? What evidence do we have that we're actually moving the needle? And, it doesn't have to be something that necessarily just applies to grants, but what nonprofits often fail to do, they can tell a great story, but then people are left wondering, okay, well then what happened to that person later? What happened to them afterwards? Where are they now? I worked for a scholarship organization for a while as a consultant that gave scholarships to young homeless people who wanted to go to college. And they had great stories to tell about those students, but they had no information that they had not invested in the ability to track those people once they graduated from college, or maybe they didn't stay. So you really have to be able to tell that whole story. And then I also think that your resources, what's available to you, matters a lot. Don't try to take on something that you don't begin to have the ability to invest in or the people to help you with it. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. Thank you, Leah. We do have one. I know we're out of time here, but we do have one more question I'd like us to get to. Actually, it's a two-part question. The first part is, how do, this attendee saying, my question is particularly on individual giving. First part is how to enhance your donor base, interact new donors, where to find these donors from? Is there any platform? And number two, what is the best way to engage lapsed donors? I think she's meaning to say.
Those are great questions. So I would give you the quick, simple answer probably to both of those is the segmentation of your donor base, the ability to go in, and again, we go into a lot of detail with organizations around ways to segment. And so finding these folks in your database and segmenting them and then crafting communications directly to them. So lapsed donors is a great one. Your CRM should be able to tell you who, you've the phraseology, this year, but not last year. Some years, but not this year. You should be able to pull those folks out in reports, and then you want to craft a donor journey for them so that you have communications and you decide how frequent and what it is they need to hear. And then you have a curated set of outreach and communications directly to them. And that's really the best way to do it. And I'll add to that the ability to write this stuff in advance and automate it. The other thing I'll say is whenever I take on a new client, the first thing I do is I go to their website and I make a gift. They're not big gifts, but I make a gift and I see what happens. And if all I get is an automated receipt and nothing else, then I know that they have not mapped the donor journey and I may never hear from them again. So that's what you need to think about. What's the donor getting when they interact with you? And are you progressing with them?
Leah, thank you so much. We have a lot of folks saying that they value the content that they saw today, and I'm sure many of them will use what they heard from you today. I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us today, and everybody who's joined us today. We hope to see you again.
All the best, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.